Hi, all, and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet, and who knows what else. Oh, that's the unexpected part. Sorry. Anyway, we're really glad you're here. And today we get to have the opportunity to chat with a person who's a storytelling NLP trainer, a best-selling author, a speaker, and a 2XS podcaster, among other things. And on top of that, she's very open about telling stories, which is great. I love people who want to tell stories. I've been in sales for a long time, and I learned that the best salespeople know how to tell good, true stories. That's another story, but we won't worry about it right now. But anyway, I'd like you all to meet Marsha Vanwynsberghe. My screen reader pronounced it Van Winsberg, but she was impressed by that. It was pretty close, but it's Vanwynsberghe. And Marsha, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you. And I was on Marsha's podcast, Own Your Choice, Own Your Life. And that was a lot of fun. And I told her that the price for me being on was that she had to come on Unstoppable Mindset, and she was willing. So here we are.
I jumped at the invitation. I jumped at it. Loved it.
Well, it's fun, and it's great to share, and it's great to get to know people and get to know them even more when we get to do it the other way. And hopefully we'll do more things together as well.
I love that. I would absolutely love that.
Well, tell us a little bit about kind of the early Marsha growing up and all that sort of stuff. It's always a great place to start.
It is. The early Marsha. So I was born in 1970. And I say that because, in that time and era, kids were to be seen and not heard. Yeah. Yet I was very outspoken as a child, and I had a pretty strong personality, and I used my voice a lot. And back then we used to hear that, again, be seen and not heard. And I often think back to, if young girls, we can tell them that those are leadership skills and not bossy skills. There's a lot of things that I learned as a child, but I mean, I grew up with a family who we moved a few times, and my dad, he started a business that continued to grow. So I really grew up around entrepreneurship and finding and carving your own way and building resiliency, working from a young age. My first jobs were at 12 and 13. So I grew up in that era of like work hard, that mindset.
Where were you born and where did you come from?
I was born in Chatham, Ontario.
Okay.
And then we moved up near, it's kind of farm area, but near Woodstock, Tillsonburg area, for people who might know, in Ontario. And I've been in Ontario my whole life. But that's where I was born in the city, and then I was moved to a farm, which I really did not like my parents for that at the time. I did not. But honestly, the best move we ever did. But then I've lived within that vicinity since then.
Didn't you want a pony?
I did not have a pony. I did not. I worked in tobacco as a kid. I had farm jobs. I was a hard worker.
Well, I suppose the benefit is that you learn to be a hard worker, and that's a good thing, although tobacco, but of course that was then, this is now. So it's a whole lot different environment. So
it's a very different environment now. Like that was definitely what we did then for jobs. But I also, at the same time, it put me through school. That's how I paid for school and how I was able to, go at that time. But yeah, it's a very different era. That is not something that you see very much of anymore. Thank goodness. It's still there, but we don't see it very much.
I love to collect and listen to old radio shows from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and so on. One of the shows I really like a lot is Dragnet. And the reason I mention that is that Dragnet, for a while in the 50s, was sponsored by Fatima Cigarettes. And it was fascinating listening to the commercials. Statistics prove Fatima cigarettes are better for you and more liked than any other cigarette. And of course, that's all they would ever say. Where are the statistics? But, that was advertising back then, too.
It was advertising. It makes me nervous when you hear things like that, like the things that we thought were okay, not even okay, but that they were good for us.
Yeah.
Were not, obviously not.
I think at the same time today, some people would say, well, we should get rid of all that stuff. We shouldn't allow that. It's just not true. And the reality is, my belief is, no, we shouldn't. It's part of our history. And we need to recognize from whence we came.
I think that's how we learn lessons and we move forward. I mean, it's not perfect. There's still definitely a lot of issues, even health-wise, that I see now.
Sure.
But no, I agree with you. I think that is part of history. I think that is part of history and what we walked through. And I mean, hopefully we continue to learn and do better, right? And do better and make different choices, etc. But that's definitely what marketing was then.
Yeah, and it still is somewhat today. There is more than anything fear in marketing. Oh, be sure you buy our car warranty service before your check engine light goes on, and just so many different things. We still have a lot of things to address at some point, although that isn't really necessarily being dishonest, but we still use fear a lot, and politicians use fear so much to completely distort the reality of what we ought to be doing, which is to analyze what they say for ourselves rather than just living in fear and, oh, someone said this is true, so it must be so.
I love that you said that. I really do, because I feel like in some sense, we're losing I don't want to say it's the ability, because it's not the ability, but we're losing the practice of like discerned thinking and asking questions. And it's not to disagree, but I think that we should be asking questions and asking for, doing some of our own research and looking and not just taking the advice without asking any questions.
Yeah. And that's the real issue. And just the whole art of conversation seems to have gone by the wayside in so many ways, especially with and I'm not going to get too political, but a lot of the politicians all around it's all about trust me, do as I say, not as I do. And we're encouraged not to ask questions, which is so unfortunate.
It's scary, actually. I think it's actually scary, because I think any time that I am encouraged or pushed not to ask questions, if I go back to my nature as I talked when I was younger, then that's the first thing I do.
Yeah.
That's the very first thing I do. I'm like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel. Mm-hmm.
And, we let some people just steer us so much. One of my favorite gripes of late is weather people. Out here in California, in May and June, we had a lot of marine layers and a lot of clouds and so on. So people were always complaining. The weather prognosticators were complaining about May gray and June gloom. Will it ever end? Yet the reality is it kept the temperatures down. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting away from all of that, and we're up at like 95 and 96 Fahrenheit today. We were yesterday as well. And what's happening? Now we're starting to see wildfires, and we're hearing about why we have wildfires, and we're going to be in the fire season. And isn't that horrible? Well, you wished it all on us because you didn't like May gray and June gloom. I mean, we can't please anybody anymore.
No, and it's interesting because I always I think to go back to gratitude in some way, shape, or form. As a Canadian who literally only has 3 to 4 months a year that are nice where it's warm, I mean, I couldn't even imagine being upset about May. It's just perspective, right? It's a perspective. I look for the things to be grateful for.
Yeah. And you know what? The May gray and June gloom did keep things cool. Hardly any fires. Mm-hmm. I heard on the news this morning there were 4, although relatively small, and they were caught quickly because we're getting better at dealing with it here. Small wildfires that helicopters and tankers dealt with very quickly. But nevertheless, now we're seeing it. And it's so unfortunate. We can never be satisfied.
No, and we don't have a lot of experience that within Ontario where I live, like other parts of Canada do. Yeah. But this year we definitely got the effects of we were surrounded by wildfires, and like, not literally, but the smoke came in, and we probably had about 2 weeks where, it was yellow skies. It was hard to breathe. It had moments where it was really challenging. So it really did give a perspective of, I had people here who were saying, like, this is just absolutely horrible. I'm like, it's not great, but I mean, we could be in the fire. Like,
Yeah.
we're actually not. Like, I can still go outside. It's still safe. It's not ideal, but I guess my brain, I'm looking at it going, I mean, I'm not in the fire, so it could be much worse.
Do we know where the fires came from?
We had them on both sides. We had them on our East Coast. So in like, Nova Scotia had them really bad, and then Calgary had them really bad at the beginning of May. So they kind of came from both ways.
Do we know what caused them yet?
Nope. Not that I've heard.
That's unfortunate, but the other side of it is, was it really warm? Was that also part of it?
Well, I watched an interview. It was interesting because we have a lot of friends who are firefighters, and I watched an interview with a firefighter who said that we had we had a very heavy winter, and then the snow was gone early April. And then we had a lot of rain in the beginning of April, and then it got really hot for about 2 weeks, and then it got dry, super dry. And it was just the perfect condition. They said it's absolutely a perfect condition for it to happen. So I think I don't remember a year like this that we've had, so I'm assuming that was part of it.
See, down here, with all of the marine layers and so on, and the fact that I don't know whether it's all gone, but as of the beginning of July, there was still snow on the ground in some parts of California, like in the mountain areas and so on. And we didn't have hot, dry May, or we had no hot, dry June. So now we're starting to see it. And I can understand that. And I was always wondering, well, why did Canada get the fires that it did that sent the smoke everywhere? But it makes sense with what you're describing.
Yeah, very similar to what you said. Like, it was very, very hot in April for us, not normal at all. And then we had no rain until almost the end of May, early June. So it was very strange spring for us. Now we've had lots of rain since then, but there you go. It's okay. It's like, it actually cleared up the air, to be honest. So I take it. Again, it's perspective.
It is. It's all about perspective, which makes a lot of sense. Well, so getting back to you and all that, so you went to college?
I went to university here, and I actually I became a registered kinesiologist. So I worked in post-physical rehab for about 28 years. And about the last couple of years before I was done in that career, which ended very abruptly during 2020 and never came back until like probably 8-9 months later. And by then the business had pretty much dissolved itself. And so I did that for, like I said, about 28 years. And I did love it. I like the problem solving. I like the thinking and the helping people. I had some people, we were learning how to walk again, like that post recovering from surgery. And then really, as that time wore on and my life was walking through some different challenges, then I started to work into a space of like learning how to share stories and navigate a really difficult time. And so when the pandemic came, I actually just pivoted, went right into coaching online and supporting people online. And I felt like it had been like a complete out of nowhere, but it hadn't. I mean, out of the 28 years in working with physical rehab, I did a lot of coaching. I had to do an awful lot of coaching and supporting with people. So it was very similar.
So when did you start involving yourself in the whole concept of NLP and bringing that into what you did?
So I actually did things very backwards. If I'll take it back to a little bit, about 10, 12 years ago, we started to experience teen substance abuse. I found my world get really, really small, and I lost my voice, didn't know how to use it. And I really started to do a lot of work to learn how to, reframe my thoughts and catch what I was thinking and the words that I was saying. for probably 3 years, I was doing the beginning pieces of NLP without ever knowing it was NLP. I had no idea. And in 2020, it crossed my path and I looked at it and went, that's interesting. There was something about it that was intriguing to me, is learning to understand the power of my thoughts and how my brain works and how to get it to my thoughts to actually support me in what I am creating and what I want to do. The other piece that really intrigued me with NLP was that the way it was taught for me was that there was a lot of ways to support myself in healing. And I say that because I really didn't understand how we hold on to so much, trauma, stress in our tissues, in our body, and we push that down and we carry it for years. The NLP tools helped me to really start to learn how to release that. And that helped me to work through some of the healing. So had I learned that earlier, I think that it would have actually really supported me earlier. But we all know that the teacher comes when we're ready, and I probably wouldn't have been ready, and I probably wouldn't have seen it, and I wouldn't have understood it. So it all happened in the timing that it was meant to happen.
Well, tell me a little bit about what NLP is, what it stands for, and all of that, especially for those who may not be very knowledgeable about it.
Absolutely. It is called neuro-linguistic programming. It's really the, neuro, how we bring in our information. We all bring it in through a number of our different senses. The linguistic is like the language, the words that we speak, the programs that we speak, how we are able to take in that information and like delete, distort, generalize, put it together. And then the programs is really how we all function. Most of us, well, this is how it works. Our conscious mind is only responsible for like 5% of our thoughts, our beliefs, our decisions, and we set our goal with our conscious mind. Our subconscious mind is like the wheel that's never stopping. It's running on autopilot nonstop. And most of us, we go into this space, this learning space, personal development space, helping others. We try and set goals for ourselves, and we do it with 5% of our capacity. But we're never addressing the stories, the limiting beliefs, the things that we have that we're holding on to that keep blocking us. And then what happens is that you set a goal, you work like crazy to get to it, and you might just fall shy of it. Or if you do achieve it, but you don't believe that you're worthy of receiving it, you'll self-sabotage, you'll lose it. You will keep on this cycle of always trying to strive and achieve more. And as you do that, we put ourselves on that hamster wheel nonstop. And really, it's not the goal that's the problem. It's, do we believe in ourselves to achieve the goal that is really what we want to work towards? And with so many of us who, again, we've carried these stories in our bodies for so long, you can't just work harder to make something happen. It's sometimes you have to go backwards and figure out what it is that has been holding you back so that you can actually move towards your goals in a more aligned and effortless manner.
One of the things that I find often, and I've worked to get away from this, but is that we don't tend to do much introspection, especially on a daily basis. We don't take time at the end of the day to look at what happened. And I don't like to use the word fail because I think it's all about learning experiences, but what didn't go as well as it could? How do I make it better next time? What went really well and what could I do to even improve that? And really pondering and thinking about what happened in the course of the day. And we don't do that. We don't talk to ourselves. We don't talk with ourselves. And we really just figure, oh, I don't have time. I got too much other stuff to do. So listening to you describe NLP really does in part go back to, you've got to be your own best teacher and really learn how to do these things.
I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't. I think this is the big thing, is that we're on a journey of always learning to lead ourselves. That's what I believe. I think that we're always learning to lead ourselves. And one of the number one premise of NLP is to live at cause in your life. And that is, we can either live at cause or live at effect. When we live at affect, we are in a space and a mindset of victim mindset, anger, blame, resentment, all of those emotions. I lived there for a really long time. I think all of us at one point in our life have lived there, but when we stay there, we don't create change. When we live at cause, we come to a space of saying, like, how can that introspection you're talking about, how can I, look at what went well today, what's not going well? And one of the first things I'll do, I have moments sometimes where I'm like, wow, Marsha, I'm really not really proud of how you're behaving right now, or what is going on with you.
Mm-hmm.
Acting this way. And it almost always comes down to, if I'm completely honest, I have a moment of introspection and I'm like, okay, wow, you're not doing the things that you need to take care of you. You are not putting good boundaries in place. You're not getting the rest. Okay, so now how can we put that plan in place? And it's like a calibration that comes back to regularly being in that space of taking responsibility for myself so that I can best lead myself. Never about perfection. But I'm in a constant conversation with myself all day long. When things are going right, when I could maybe do something differently, when I'm working to, maybe celebrate something that I'm doing that is a challenge. I think that piece of self-awareness and introspection is, I don't want to call it a lost art, but it's not something that we're making time for on a consistent basis.
Yeah, we're not at all.
Mm-mm.
I love to joke and tell people, when we talk about talking to ourselves and so on, and say, well, do you get answers? But the reality is, of course, that the more we do it, the more we will get answers. And the one I'm going to worry is when I don't get an answer.
Yes, I'm with you. I am with you on that.
Because we really need to learn to communicate with our heart, with ourselves, and understand. And as I have learned to tell people, I used to say I'm my own worst critic, and I've learned that's a horrible thing to say. It's really, I'm my own best teacher, because I'm the only one who can really teach me. Other people can advise and give me information, but I'm the one that has to learn it, and I'm the one that has to teach it to me.
I love that you said that, because I think that that's a really powerful reframe. And I think that's another thing that comes from a lot of the NLP training, is learning how to reframe thoughts. But that's a really powerful reframe, because I have called myself my own worst critic for most of my life.
I know, I have too.
Yep, I have. And it's interesting because, and there is an advantage to this. And I do want to share one thing quickly, because in the area that I work in, where I help people with vulnerable stories, how to share, show themselves, like show up, be seen, use their voice. One of the biggest things people are constantly afraid of, I would say one of the number one fears, is what will people think of me?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. It is the number one fear. What will people think of me? And I often ask people, like, well, what are some of the thoughts that you have about yourself? What do you say about yourself? Because I think when we really break it down, there's no one who's criticizing us nearly as bad as what we're doing to ourselves. And so when you start to see that, it's like, wait, why am I giving all of this energy to what everyone else is saying, when really I spend 24/7 with myself, and my thoughts and what I'm saying to myself is never going to help me move forward. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece is that I think, again, my opinion, but every relationship that we build outside of ourselves comes from us first. Mm-hmm. So I can't be a really nice, I genuinely believe this. I can't go out and be a very nice human to everyone else and be an absolute piece of garbage to myself, because it's not authentic. That's not authentic at all. And so I think that if you want to create change in your life, even externally with relationships, friends, whatever that is, it really does start with learning how to be a better human to yourself.
Yeah. And you've got to learn to like yourself. And if you don't, then find out why. Yeah. And it's okay to find out why. And the reality is, ultimately, people can make observations to you, but only you can really tell you why the two of you aren't getting along.
Because I'm my best teacher. I love that you said that. I just, that's a beautiful reframe. We can be our best teacher. And I am with you in the sense that I rarely use the word failure because I don't like the connotation with
Yeah.
it, because I think everything is teaching us something.
Mhm.
And we get to look at that as that, well, that taught me something. Now, if I choose to make the same choice over and over and over, and I'm angry with everyone else in my life, there comes a point where I have to recognize that I'm the common denominator. So what can I do differently? How can I choose differently? How can I surround myself with different people? And then I'm learning the lessons that I'm here to learn. But I really think that we're on a constant cycle of learning.
I love Albert Einstein's definition of insanity, which is that people who do the same thing the same way every time and expect a different result certainly are not all there.
No, and I mean, I've caught myself. There have been many times in my life where I've caught myself and I'm frustrated with something or something that's happening. And it will be like, wait, this is the exact same response that happens every single time.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, nope. So why would I possibly expect something different? Like, why would I? That doesn't make any sense. And I can catch it and work on that reframe. But again, this goes back to having this dialogue with myself, with ourselves on a daily basis.
What we tend to not understand or don't want to understand is that there really are basic laws that we live by and should live by. And if you are within those laws or not, but if you're doing something and you do it the same way every time, you're going to get the same result. And you have to decide whether you want that result.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't, then something different is required of you in order to create a different result. We do live, I know people don't like that, but we do live the same lessons over and over until we learn the lesson. Like we do live the same experiences over and over until we learn the lessons.
And unfortunately, it happens time and time again, generation and generation again. And somehow we've got to do a better job of really learning that you've got to do things different if you want a different result. We were talking earlier about the whole issue of growing up and learning and recognizing what we learn and all that, and like banning books. You know, yes. We're getting away from understanding history. And so what are we doing? We're banning books. We're getting rid of the lessons or the places where we could get great lessons for poor excuses for banning the books in the first place.
Yes. I have a hard time understanding all of that. Not to get not getting political. I just have a really hard time understanding that we're just we did make mistakes in past. 100% we made, and we're still making them today. Mm-hmm. But banning things and ignoring it like it never happened, then we're not pulling lessons from that. We're not learning something from that. I don't think that I don't think it's beneficial to pretend that things didn't happen. I think we learned some very valuable lessons from some very big mistakes in history.
Well, people have said that Dr. Seuss was a racist, and so we should be banning his books. Is that good justification for banning all the good things and all the positive stuff that kids get out of the books? Or does that open up a great opportunity to have a discussion and teach people the subtleties of maybe where racism did come through in some of the things that he wrote? But for the most part, people acknowledge that he did a great job. Or even To Kill a Mockingbird is a real crazy one to talk about banning, because it's all about discussing how people were treated inappropriately.
I think we have to continue having those conversations if we're going to change behavior and learn how to treat people differently.
Should all of Bill Cosby's humor go away simply because, as it turned out later in life, we found that he had feet of clay in some ways? And the reality is, I think they're two different things. The humor and the wonderful joy and laughter he brought to people as a stand-up comic and even in TV and so on can't be erased. And if you do, you're missing so much.
You are. And I think this is a really interesting conversation, because I do not know the quote, but if we're only, and I'm not justifying, but if we are judged by our worst days, then nobody is free free in a sense. And I think that we need to be accountable for our mistakes, especially when we are doing things
Yep.
like this. I definitely agree with you on this. But there has to come a point that I mean, if I hold on to the energy of that feeling of holding the worst days of every person in my life against them, I'm not going to have anyone in my life, because I mean, and what a terrible thing to focus on is only the worst things that people have done.
And the reality is that there is so much positive energy that we can attract if we choose to be more positive than negative. And recognizing that we don't need to be negative. It doesn't add value to us.
It doesn't. And that's such an expression, such an understanding. It doesn't add value to us. Many people, and people will say to me, well, how do I show up when everyone around me is just negative like that? Like, I don't know how to do it. Well, sometimes boundaries have to come in place, and sometimes you decide where you put your time and your energy.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to know that, you know, there are times where I will say no to certain things because that's just not where I choose to put my energy. And I think this is really important. I'm not saying that because I'm judging somebody else and I don't like how they speak or how they show up. I'm doing that because that's what's best for me. I feel like that's choosing ourselves. We get to choose who we spend that time and energy with. It's not about pointing fingers and making it about other people. We just get to decide where we put it. And I really think that there's a difference between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always a matter of choice as to which way you want to go. Like I've said to people on many occasions, sometimes things happen to us that we don't have. And actually, a lot of times, probably things happen to us that we don't have any control over happening. But we always have control over how we choose to deal with what happens.
Yes. And that is actually, I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but it was years ago for me. One of the big turning points was when I heard Stephen Covey's quote, and it was that you are not a product of your circumstances. You are a product of your decisions.
Yep.
That was a light switch for me moment where I went, oh, okay, that actually makes sense. Because I was living in a situation that I don't remember asking for. I didn't want. It's not what I wanted to deal with. But I did have a choice in how I responded. And that's when I really started to reframe my thoughts, that I could choose how I show up. I could choose how I responded. And when you can start to take back even a sliver of choice in your life, it really will start to shift your energy and how you show up. And actually, I think the other piece of this is that when we stay in that angry victim mindset and feel like this is just all unfair and it's happening, no change happens there. And when we can start to become a product of our decisions, we can actually start to create change. Yeah. And it's a really powerful message and I know it's not easy. I just know that it's still a choice.
Yeah. It's always a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
there's a lot of energy that's wasted when it's not.
Oh, so much. Yeah. I love the quote I heard, and I don't know about the truth of it, but I choose to think it makes sense that it takes 17 muscles in your face to frown, but only 3 to smile.
Isn't that something?
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's in that, and that's a choice. Sometimes when I go out for a walk, and I walk my dog a lot, or I'm in the store, I try really hard to make eye contact and smile at people. And it's amazing how that's just not always, that might be seen as weird, but I actually like to do it.
Yeah, well, and it makes such a difference. You smile, people smile at you, and it goes so far toward helping, I think, people feel better.
Yes. And you could be meeting people on sometimes their worst day. And sometimes that smile, that just gesture can make such a difference. And it can make an impact in both of your lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And you may not even know the impact ever or until later, but still it makes a big difference. So many times we plant seeds that we don't necessarily know how they'll grow, and we may not even learn how they grow. But nevertheless, it's always good to work on planting good seeds and not bad ones.
It now 100%. And it made me think of, I really like, it's such a short and simple book, but I really like is it Mitch Albom, The Five People You Meet in
Yeah.
Heaven? And I like that because the reframe there is that the people that you have the biggest impact on, you might not even realize it.
Yeah.
Like they might not be the closest people to you. It could be somebody that you cross paths on their worst day, and that created a ripple in their lives. And I've always loved that concept.
Well, and you may not even ever know
No.
how much of an impact you had. One of my favorite stories, and I've told it a couple times here, but I'll tell it again, is that in 2003, I went to New Zealand, and I had been interviewed in 2001 by a gentleman who was always known as the Larry King of New Zealand. His name was Paul Holmes, and he came to interview us in the States at our home in New Jersey. And he said, if you ever get to New Zealand, let me know. I want to interview you first. And so it turns out that there was an opportunity to go and do work in New Zealand for 3 weeks. And I emailed Paul and let him know we were coming. And we got there on a Wednesday morning, and I got a chance to nap because it was a long flight. But we got there and napped, and then I was on his show that night at 7. And what happened was that a week and a few days later, it was the second Saturday I was in New Zealand. Apparently, the show interviewing me reran. And the next day, and I wasn't connected with this at all, but a group of blind people took a river raft, and they had a guide, and they all went and they had a great time. And at the end, the guide said, I have to tell you a story. He said, I was going to cancel this trip yesterday because I didn't think blind people could do this and that you would have any fun at all. And I'd probably have to be jumping in the water and saving all of you. But he said, last night I saw the Paul Holmes show, and there was this bloke from the States. I love it. This bloke from the States who was in the World Trade Center on September 11th, and he got out. And I figured if he could get out and he could be here and talk about that, I should be able to have fun with all of you guys. And I have to tell you, this was the best trip I have ever had a chance to guide.
I love that story.
You never know.
Thank you for sharing that. I have not heard that one. I love that story. That's beautiful.
You just never know. And I've always felt if I can make a difference in my life or one person's life, then I've done my job. And anything else beyond that is great. And I've chosen to speak because my belief is that if I can help people move on from September 11th and learn about blindness and guide dogs and so on, then it's a good thing. And that's what I've been working on for the last almost 22 years now, and having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that drew me to your story, and knowing that I wanted to share it is because exactly that you're making a difference with your story. And it's really opening up conversations and showing people how they can move forward and how they can make a difference. And I absolutely love that.
Well, tell me a little bit about you getting into doing a lot of storytelling. You said that you, during your career, which I assume ended mostly because of the pandemic, the company, yes. But you learned a lot about telling stories, which I always think is a great way to handle any situation, and it helps people grow to have a greater understanding. But then you started coaching full-time, and now you tell stories. So what does it mean to own your own story?
Well, I think I love this question. And I think when it comes down to it, you either own your story or it owns you. To keep it super simple, we've all walked through an experience, we've all walked through challenges, but that doesn't have to identify us, right? It's part of us, but it doesn't have to be our identity. And I think that's the piece, is that when you own the story, it doesn't own you. But when it does own you, it controls you. And I mean that in a sense that there is a tremendous amount of people who are hiding in what I would call a shame story. And they're hiding it, hoping and praying that no one ever knows that they've struggled, that they're struggling, that there's a challenge happening. I think that has been even more amplified with social media, because I think that for a long time there was this image of perfectionism and wow, look at how great everyone is doing, when it's just a snapshot of a person's day. And so when you don't own the story, it owns you. And for the longest time, I really tried to hide that part of myself because I just didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know how to deal with the criticism and the judgments and all of the words. And I'm still trying to, at the time, was trying to navigate a really difficult time. And so when those words started to land on me, like own your choices, own your life, and owning your story, and what did that look like? It was amazing that I came to a point of saying, yes, I was a parent who dealt with teen substance abuse. It changed me at the core. And I learned how to share my story, which allowed me to heal, which allowed me to build better relationships with my kids, to really do something really good with the most difficult experience of my life. And part of that became sharing stories. How do you share a difficult story? Like, how do you share a story, especially when there's other people involved? Pardon me, 1 second, I have a tickle. How do you share a story when there's other people involved?
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is misunderstood a lot. Another tickle. Sorry. Okay, let's try this again. Yeah, nice time for a tickle. But here, the thing is that when I first started to share my story, I was blown away by how many people would stop me and say, oh my gosh, that's my story. I've never told a soul. I've held on to it for 30, 40 years. And listening to people be that victim to shame, and shame loves secrecy, right? So the more people shove it down, the more shame grows.
Yeah.
And so by helping people to share a story, then all of a sudden they were able to feel free from that story. And it started to open up this idea of how can we start to share more of us? And that's how we find our connections and how we build our connections. And so storytelling wise, if I can share, I watched this today. I actually ran a masterclass today. Pardon me, I've been talking all day. But I ran a masterclass today, and I asked if there was anybody who wanted to come on live and practice how to share and frame a story. And one of the moms who jumped on, I saw her jump on. I'm like, this is awesome. I was so excited because I've had a number of conversations with her, and both of her boys they both had a genetic condition. They spent 18 years in the hospital, almost 90% of it in the hospital. So I could imagine what that family went through. They lost their one son. Their other son survived. And she started to share, and she was very afraid. She was scared to share it. She got quite emotional. But as she did it, people were commenting and pouring so much love and support into her that I actually made her pause. And I said, I need you to read these comments, read these comments. And she just sat there and went, I had no idea. And I'm like, this is the point about our stories. Our stories show that we are so much more connected than we think that we are. We are so much more alike than we think that we are. And I think that learning how to share our stories normalizes our connections. And we don't have to walk the same story as somebody else in order to be connected to them, because we're all connected by emotions, experiences, lessons, etc. So that's really where it started. And when I started to find my own freedom from my story, I actually started to heal. But listening to everyone else give me feedback and tell me that was their story, it just gave me fuel to keep going. And I felt very compelled that this was my purpose in life, was to start to change stigma and start to open up conversations about difficult topics.
Yeah. Well, and it's, how do I say it, an exciting thing to be able to do and to recognize and then to help bring about. And whether you know what, as we talked about before, whether you know what really happens and how you affect people or not isn't the issue, but at least you're the conduit and you know that.
I like being the conduit. I actually like it. And it helped me to shift in looking that, through the most difficult experience I've walked through, I was able to give it purpose. And because I could give it purpose, that helped me to heal. And it helped me feel like maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And a counselor said that to me, and it was etched in me when I said, no matter where I go, nobody is talking about difficult things in life. And she said, maybe that's because you're supposed to. Maybe you're supposed to talk. And I'm like, you want me to just talk about this? Like, what will people think? What will they say? And I can tell you all of the stories I made up in my head about how bad it would be and how scary it would be. None of them happened.
Yeah.
I survived. And I mean, you speak, you understand, like it's you to big groups. We tell ourselves stories, but it was an incredible experience. And I continue to do that to this day. And podcasting is part of it. And what it's done is it's brought connections into my life that I never would have had. And I know I've normalized a lot of topics that people don't want to talk about. But I do think the interesting thing is that tying it back to the very beginning of my story and intro that I shared here, I grew up in an era when you didn't talk about difficult things. Like you literally just put your smile on and pretended everything was fine. And so when I decided that I wanted to start sharing, I would love to say I was met with so much love and support. And that was not the truth. It took time because it was uncomfortable for people in my life. But I kept saying, just trust me that I will be always sharing and leaving everyone in integrity. It's at the utmost highest intention. And it didn't take long for others to see why I wanted to do it. And I'm so grateful that I did.
Yeah. Well, you talked about having teen substance abuse in your family, and that had to be a hard thing, but learning to talk about it is also part of what probably was good therapy for you.
It was the best therapy. I have done so much different support. And I would say it was one of the best things that I ever did for myself, healing wise and therapy wise.
Ironically, picking on the media as we often do, for me, subjecting myself to literally hundreds of interviews after September 11th from media people who asked anything from the most intelligent, thought-provoking questions to the dumbest questions in the world. Even so, it made me talk about September 11th, and it made me do it in ways I would never have imagined. So for me, that was some of the best therapy I think I've ever had. And I thank everybody in the media for it, ironically enough, after knowing that we still love to pick on them anyway.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, like, I've had many people ask me questions that I'm like, I am not answering that. Like, I'm just not, there's no purpose behind that. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
People will ask. I also think that people ask because they don't know, or they're looking for a story.
Correct.
They don't know. It's interesting because I'm going to say this. I think that I would rather somebody ask me a question that's not appropriate than give me that glance and judge and not ask. Because sometimes people don't ask out of fear.
Yep.
And I've actually had a couple of really interesting opportunities where I've been able to use that conversation as a little bit of nice education, because I think the other thing is that with our story, we didn't look like what most people thought people like who had this issue, which to me was all the more reason to start to talk about it, because there's hundreds of thousands of me. It's not that I was the only one. And I mean, the only reason that most of us feel alone when it comes to these topics is because we're not talking. And we're not alone. None of us are. And so I really think those are the pieces. But I love how you shared that. And I do think that by talking, I really wanted to help others out. And I was also helping myself. I didn't know that at the time, but it was one of the best things I could have ever done. Yeah,
because it helped you as much as anything. How did you discover that you could only own your own choices?
The hard way. I think the hard way. I spent a lot of time trying to fix, manage, control, micromanage everything around me, trying to make it better, trying to save them, trying to, fight a system. I was just in this constant fight mode. And really what was happening there is nothing external to me was changing, and everything internal to me was changing, but not for the better. I was in a space where I was probably at my worst health. I wasn't sleeping hardly at all. I didn't have hardly energy. I didn't have a lot of positive joy or good outlook in my life. And through a lot of work and reading and support, I started to recognize that I wasn't owning any of my own choices. I was literally blaming everyone for where my life was at and not taking any responsibility for myself. And ironically, when I started to do that, it got really easy to say, wait, is that my choice? Nope, that one's not mine either. Nope, that one's not mine either. And I literally would go through the list and it was like, oh my gosh, I was spending like 97% of my day doing everything that wasn't my choice and then having nothing left for me and then being angry at everyone else because I had nothing left for me in order to do that. So owning my choices became a motto for me. And when it came to wanting to start the podcast, own your choices, own your life, that was I had people say that's too long of a title. You shouldn't do that. And I'm like, those words save me. And that's literally, they've become the pillar cornerstone for me and they save me so that it became very easy to use them.
I never would have thought of own your choices, own your life being too long of a name.
I had so many people. This is the thing. When you ever want to do anything new, be very careful how many opinions you ask for.
Yes.
Because you could get a lot. You could get an awful lot.
Or feel free to get all the opinions and then you just have to synthesize them together and decide where you're going to go.
Exactly. When I wrote my solo book in 2017, it's called When She Stopped Asking Why. And I waited for a while for that title, just hadn't come to me yet. And when it did, I went to my publisher. I'm like, I've got the name. It's When She Stopped Asking Why. And the publisher said, oh no, that's just way too long. That's way too long. No one's going to understand it. And I said, I actually think more people are going to get it than anything because it's, when you ask the question why, it only is appropriate if you're moving towards something, like if you're focusing on the why, the bigger picture and that mission. But if you're asking why as a victim, and why is this happening to me? That will never change the story. And for me, that's when the story changed, is I would catch myself and ask why. And it's like, no, wait, why doesn't matter? The what matters. What is a verb? What is an action? That is something I can control. And that's what I would just shift it to. So again, back to what you're saying, you've got to follow your gut on some of these things and listen to what feels right for you.
We forget all too often to follow our gut and our instincts. And they're always telling us the right answer.
They are. They're speaking to us. We just might not be listening.
I learned that playing Trivial Pursuit. Learned it the hard way. You got to listen to what your brain tells you because you're sitting there going, when a question comes up and you get an answer, no, that can't be right. And you give another answer. And it turns out you were supposed to answer with the original answer.
The first one. How many times in Trivial Pursuit does that happen? A lot.
All the time.
Yeah, a lot.
So I work at it. And now people say when I play it, how come you get so many of these right? And I just keep telling them I'm just listening to my gut.
That's awesome.
It is. It's fun. Well, when you are working with people, are you expecting to make a change or do you feel that's what you have to do, or you're just really trying to help and let them make their own choices and decide whether they want to change or not?
B, the option B. Yes. I like, again, back to conduit. I like to be the person. So this person who came onto the masterclass today, for example, I've probably had 4 or 5 conversations with her. And this has just been something she's working towards. Like, these are difficult, vulnerable stories that people are showing up and trying to find a way to share, because the intention is that they want to do something good in the world with it. They want to help somebody else. A lot of times, like, we are perfectly designed to help the younger version of who we were. And so they want to do something, but it will be in her own time and it will be in their own time. And she even said today, she's like, thank you for like just nudging me, but never pushing. And I'm like, I can't make you do anything. And if so, like, that's not where real change comes from. So I like to be a person who can help them a lot of times I can see what someone has available, but before they can see it, but I can't make them do it. It's never my job to make them do it. It's mine to show them what's possible.
Yeah. And you can't make the change happen all you can do is at most set by example. As Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world, but you have to do what you have to do and be who you have to be. And hopefully people will recognize the example.
Yes, that's why I think I really on a regular basis share, like I just share so openly, because I am never going to be the person who shows up online and saying everything is rainbows and butterflies and it's a piece of cake.
Yep.
I'm not going to go on and complain, but I know how to be real. And it's like, sometimes we're walking through really difficult times. And it requires me to focus even more on my own mindset and how I show up. But I will never show up and pretend that it's a piece of cake and it's never a problem, because that's not relatable. That doesn't help anybody. I would rather show people how to navigate through something. And if it speaks to them and it helps them to say, I actually want to do something with my story too, I would love to know how to help someone else out, then I hope it inspires them to do that.
And what do you say when they say that?
I ask them, usually the first thing I ask them is, what's the vulnerable story that you're holding on to that you wish you could share more openly with others?
Mm-hmm.
And for example, somebody will say, I experienced this. I have dealt with addiction. I have dealt with this. And I help them to come to a framework with their story where they're able to have perspective and they're able to pull the lessons and the learnings and the experiences from what they walked through, because that's what they share, right? That's what you share. You don't share the details of the story. It's you share the experience of what you walked through and how you helped, like how you got yourself through. And that's what you share. So I really help them to kind of dissect and look at, like, what did these experiences teach you? Who are you now because of it? And what do you want to do in your life because of this?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to, is then what comes next? And it's, what do you want to do with your life?
Exactly. And for some people, it's like their entire mission now. And I just love it. To me, it's very, it's a ripple effect. And I'm grateful to see it firsthand, is to watch people step into and share vulnerable stories. And when I see people do that, like I just cheer them on, because I know how scary that is. And I know how hard that is. But I also know that story is going to reach others. I actually interviewed a musician who had dealt with addiction for a number of years. Most people didn't know it. And he was sharing online. He was building quite a following. He was singing. People loved his music, etc. And he said, it was funny. I was building a following until I decided to quit drinking. And then I started to share my story as somebody who was working through addiction. Then all of a sudden, he goes, my following and my support and my community grew tenfold.
Yeah.
Because I let them see me. I gave them something to root for. And I think that is such a beautiful piece, that as humans, we want to be able to support others, but that's going to require that we let others see themselves through our experiences. Like, they have to be able to recognize that, wait, she knows what I'm going through, because I could hear it in her message. And then we start to build these connections.
It isn't telling the story, it's telling the story in a personal and open way, so that people, as you say, see you. It's not just, I'm going to tell the story and everything's going to be great and people are going to love me. It doesn't matter if you're not genuine.
No, it's the authenticity, the genuineness, the realness is so much more important. And even here as an example for anybody who's listening, like, I didn't share much of my story, and I didn't have to. You don't have to share the details. It's not the details that is going to connect you with other people. It's that experience and what you choose to do with it. And I see such a bigger movement now of people who are recognizing that they've walked through something really difficult and they want to do something good with it in the world. And I think that's how we start to change the conversation around these kinds of topics.
When you start to tell your story, if you get somebody who really pushes back and criticizes you, how do you handle that? What do you do, and how do you rebound and go on?
Well, in the beginning, it took me a while to rebound. I'm not going to lie. Like in the beginning, it was hard because, nobody wants to be criticized.
No.
But it didn't take long. I had some really good mentors and I did a lot of work. It didn't take long to recognize that when you're going to talk about difficult things in life, you're going to ruffle some feathers. You're going to push buttons. It's going to happen. And people will always react to you based on whatever lens they're wearing. If they're wearing a lens of like victim, anger, resentment, you don't get me, you don't understand, I can't change that. I can't fix that. Like I can just be me. You said be the change. I literally wear that word on my bracelet. Like those are my go-to words. I get to choose how I can be the change that I wish to see. And so that's always a reminder for me. But when I see that criticism now, this is how, and I advise and share, this is just my opinion on it, is when I see it, if it doesn't feel good for me, I will delete it and block it. If it is something that is constructive, that maybe a person is asking for some questions on, then I will try and answer. Because maybe this person is just in a space of curiosity going, wait, how do you move through something that's difficult? So I don't just take it at face value and judge it. But if it doesn't feel good, I still get criticism to this day. I will block, delete. I will move things. I, again, really protect my energy, put boundaries in place when it comes to putting myself out there. And there are times that I have to remind myself, sometimes I'll share something that's quite vulnerable and I'll get 10, 15 incredible comments back and I'll get one negative one. Yeah. Do I choose to put all my energy into the one negative one, or do I focus on the other 10 to 14 that were incredible? I think we get to choose what we focus on. And so the day that I start to focus on only the negative comments, that person is, I can't make them change. And maybe that's not their journey. And that's not up to me. So when that happens, I just honestly, I check in with myself. Again, go back to self like reflection and intention. And I look at it and say, did I say anything that was inappropriate? Did I do something? I will go internally and look, not being critical, but I will look to make sure I didn't do anything that wasn't. And then I just look at it and say, I can't change that person. Sometimes I've even said, thank you for your opinion. And sometimes I just block and delete because I know that, at least once a week, I get a message from a completely new person. I take those messages, I screenshot, I save them. They're my reminder of, keep going, because the messages that we're sharing might not be for the people who are in our life today. They are for the people that we haven't met yet.
What about, when you do get a negative comment, when do you decide maybe, I really should address this?
If I am not sure on what they're saying, or I want clarification, if I'm in a good space, if I'm not in a good space and I don't need that right now, then I won't do it. So I really do go internal first. I will ask for clarification. I've had conversations with some people. A lot of times when that happens, it's a person who wants to prove that you can't share all stories, or they will say, you don't know my story and you don't know how bad it is. And when I hear that, like when I hear things like that, I know I'm talking about victim mentality, and I can't change victim mentality. No. I know that. And so I don't even try, to be honest. I don't try.
Yeah.
But I've had other people say, I know I don't feel that way, but I do want to look at it differently. What would you recommend that I do? And I'll say, honestly, I've got like almost 600 podcast episodes. Just grab something and start listening if you want. Like
binge listen.
Right. Like there's content out there to support you if you want to create change. And so I'll support that any day, but I certainly don't go into the business of trying to convince, fix, manage, change.
No.
I just don't have the energy for that, because my work is definitely to do different things than that.
And again, they have to want to do something about it. And you can't create that. It goes back to being your own best teacher again.
Yes, which I will definitely credit you, but I am going to say that because I think that's a fantastic message.
It's yours.
Well,
You're welcome to. Well, tell me, so you're doing coaching and so on. How do people find you to do master classes and take advantage of the coaching? And do you do any online courses or anything like that?
Yeah, I do a whole bunch of different things, to be honest. I have a fairly strong social media presence. I'm fairly consistent and across all platforms. If you just type Marsha Vanwynsberghe, I have my own, I've created, we're running it right now, my own NLP coaching certification called Outspoken, which I think is hilarious because that's what I was told I was too much as a kid, is outspoken. So I decided to call it that because I think that when you can start to work through those limiting beliefs of using your voice for good, you can really start to create some change. So that's a 6-month program that I do. We're starting a write your book program to help people to put their book together, especially the vulnerable stories. And I did this masterclass today. I'm going to be doing it more regularly. It's just a free masterclass online so that people can, experience some live coaching and helping them reframe in the moments. And then my podcast is called Own Your Choices, Own Your Life. And there are 3 episodes that release every single week. And it is where a lot of my content and heart and soul goes out.
Well, and it clearly is successful because you're genuine in what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to receive that. And I am very genuine. And I often think back to that young version of me who wanted to start a podcast so that I could open up doors for more people to talk about difficult stories. And I thought, where am I going to find people who want to do that? Well, it's not that hard. It's not been that hard. There's a lot of different people who are out there sharing challenging stories. And I love it.
If you had one thing that you could go back and say to that young Marsha, what would it be?
To get out of her head and to start even sooner.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I think that's as much advice as anybody could ever ask for. And I really appreciate you being here and being with us. This has gone really well. I think it's been fun. I hope you've had fun.
I've loved it. I love the conversation. I love the connection. Again, just this piece on podcasting, I get to have conversations and pay it forward and help and share. And I love them. So I'm very grateful to have been here today, Michael. Thank you for asking.
And if you want to do it again any old time, you need to just let me know because it would be fun to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would love it.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to us today. Please reach out to Marsha. She would like to hear from you. I'm sure you said Marsha Van Y, right?
Yes, Marsha Van W.
Marsha Van W, not Y. W-H-Y, Marsha Van W. Okay. One of my favorite stories is about a college class. I think it was a philosophy class, and the teacher came in and passed out a final test assignment, and on the paper was the word why. And he said, you've got 2 hours and answer all the questions on the test. And the only question was why. There was one student in the class who sat there for a minute. He wrote something down, took up his paper, handed it in, and left. And he was the only one who got an A because the question he asked was, why not?
Oh, I love that.
I love that. Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories.
Great. I love that.
My general science teacher in high school told me that.
Yeah,
it's a great story. But I hope that you'll reach out to Marsha Van W, and you can find her on LinkedIn and Own Your Choices, Own Your Life podcast. She is a great interviewer as well. And so reach out and join the family and the fan club. I regard myself as a member, and I very much enjoyed having the opportunity not only to talk to her, but to get to work with her on her podcast. We would appreciate you giving us a 5-star rating. So please, wherever you're listening, give us a 5-star rating and a review of the podcast. Of course, we love glowing reviews, but whatever you say, we appreciate. And if you'd like to reach out to me directly, please feel free to do so. You can reach me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. Accessibe is ACCESSIBE.com, or you can go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is MICHAELHINGSON. So hope to hear from you. Really love all the comments when people make them, whatever they are, because I learn from them. And as I tell everyone, if I'm not learning at least as much as everybody else when we do these podcasts, then I'm not doing my job right. And I feel I learned a lot today, so I'm going to count it as a win. But again, Marsha, I want to thank you for being here and being a part of this today.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I'm very grateful for this connection.